come in there. And so without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get into my little spiel here. It is, holy cow, y'all, it is May 26th. First of all, this week blew by fast, so fast. This month blew by fast. We are now in the triple digits here in Arizona, which a lot of you are probably afraid of if you're not in Arizona, but we're used to it. So don't worry about us. We're going to be fine. Although I think there was just something in the New York Times about like, if there is a catastrophic power failure in Arizona, like the percentage of people that will end up either in emergency rooms, which will be completely overwhelmed, or dead is very alarming. However, those of us who are used to 100 degrees, we're just used to it. And hopefully it doesn't come to that. And hopefully, I don't know. Anyway, hi, everybody. And thanks so much for joining us at Secular AZ today. Again, put your name in the chat, whether you're on the webinar or on Facebook. We are a nonprofit organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state now for over a decade. And we have had some incredible programming. These are our Friday updates. We have all kinds of amazing speakers, historians, authors, elected officials, journalists, etc. Next Friday, we are going to be speaking again with Chrissy Stroop, one of my absolute favorite people. And she's going to be talking about why abuse scandals are so common in conservative Christian institutions. So hopefully you'll join us at noon next Friday for that. And we're going to continue our series about abuse happening in religious organizations with some really incredible speakers, as you can see on the screen. Oh my gosh, Rabbi Mike Harvey, I cannot wait because his Twitter feed is so cheeky already. And so I just can't wait to meet him and interact with him live and in real time. And after that, we're actually putting together a series about, oh gosh, I hope I get this right, about gun culture and Christians and how these amosexuals have kind of taken over in their churches, and some church leaders even, you know, call for violence against people like me and our panelists today. So we're going to continue with those themes. So if you like this kind of programming and the work that we do here at Secular AZ, please consider going to secularaz.org and becoming a recurring donor to support this work that we do here with education, at the legislature, at our school boards, with our action alerts, and with our legal team. But for today, I'm super excited because we are going to be speaking with Melanie Blow. Melanie is a survivor of incest, psychological abuse, and a host of other childhood trauma. Goodness sakes, like I feel like all of us are, almost everybody I meet, which is sad. But now Melanie uses her talents to prevent adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. She is the executive director of the Stop Abuse campaign. This is important work. She has an experience organizing survivors and empowering them to discuss their abuse and advocate for social change. She has been involved with the New York Coalition to Protect Children, the Legislative Advocacy Committee of the American Professional Society Against the Abuse of Children, Rochester Regional Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and more. She has her Champions of Trauma certification from the Trauma Institute at the University of Buffalo. And she has over 2 decades of legislative advocacy regarding children's issues. And she has been published in numerous medical journals, newspapers, and magazines. So I feel like I'm not worthy right now, Melanie. Thank you so much for joining us. And this has got to be, I mean, first of all, it's super important work, but it's got to be taxing.
It is. I mean, it is at times. There are, I mean, I started out my my grown-up careers. I got a degree in biochemistry. I worked for the American Red Cross for 15 years. And what I found is I couldn't really be happy unless I was working on preventing abuse. That is really what I need in my life. That's what I need to be doing and who I need to be around to really be myself and be happy and healthy and thriving. Yes, it is taxing. And especially, I mean, hearing about abuse is not, I mean, sometimes I will get triggered, sometimes it's bad, but most of the time I'm pretty used to dealing with that. But it's, oh my gosh, it's just other things that go along with it that can be so exhausting, like horrible decisions legislators make, and things like that. It's not so much the abuse itself, it's the way our society responds to it that is the worst part.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and toss this over to you. So folks, as questions come up for you, I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So please feel free to ask questions as they come to you, and I'll do my very best to insert them into the conversation. But for now, Melanie, you go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Okay, great. So talking about church, religious scandals in the church, and just in broad strokes, why do they happen? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Biggest one is ranging from simple things that everyone's imagining and everyone's heard of to things that probably, hopefully you'll walk away from today and like, oh, I didn't know that. This is interesting. I mean, simplest one, there's a lot of people in church. Nationally, if you break down all organized religion, that's a lot of people. It is a place, any place where there are children, there are going to be people who want to sexually abuse children. That is just an unfortunate fact of life. So any place where, if somebody has those proclivities and they, oh, hey, I can be a youth, there's an opportunity to be a youth minister. There's an opportunity to teach a religious instruction class. There's an opportunity to do this, that. By having this label on me, I can walk through a door and be considered an important relationship for a child and a trusted relationship for a child. Right there, that puts a huge amount, that you're putting a huge amount of risk into the equation. Other reasons why, another huge part of this is a lot of people were still mistake religiousness for morality. People mistake religiousness for meaning that this person is not capable of harming a child. This person has the same values that I do. I don't want to sexually abuse a child, so this person isn't going to want to sexually abuse a child either. That is a thinking error I think all of us go through. And like, as I have gotten trained in all of the evidence-based child sexual abuse prevention programs that are out there, every time it takes, I mean, you can sit through the course, and I highly recommend people do take a course like Stewards of Children from Darkness to Light, or what's it called, Enough Abuse. Those are great courses. I would recommend any parent or anyone who works with children professionally take those. But you sit through it and that piece about, there is no label that somebody can wear. There is no title that somebody can possess that means they are safe to be around children. That really takes some getting used to, that you really have to sit with that for a while. You really have to think about that for a while. You really have to work that through every decision you make regarding children, because it's such a normalized and a convenient way of viewing the world, but it is so wrong. And that is absolutely where danger starts. And this piece isn't exclusive to religion. This piece happens to everyone. People don't think I'm ever going to marry a sex offender. People think there's not a sex offender in my family. My child will never do this. My partner will never do this. My sibling will never do this. My parent will never do this. That's just normal. That's how our minds work. But really deciding to be an advocate, really deciding to do the right thing with children, and especially have the understanding that you can make good policy decisions on, you need to discard that. You need to realize that no, there is no label, there is no title, there is no role that automatically makes people safe. And all of us can get fooled by these people. So that's just a very uncomfortable truth. It takes a long time to get used to it, but you can. And it's a very, very, very important thing for all of us to do. The other great thing with, and again, this isn't just churches, this happens with all institutions. if there is the hint of a scandal, if there is a hint that there's been wrongdoing, we all turn into that 8-year-old who was playing ball in the house and we broke mom's favorite knickknack. And we are like, I think if I just turn it a little bit, I'll be okay. Mom's not going to notice. And that, again, that's very human. It's very normal. That's very natural, but it's incredibly destructive. When, we all did that when we were 8, when we were grown up and we're getting paid by somebody. And we have this institution, whether it's a church or a youth group or a school or a hospital or this, that, or the other thing. That institution means something to us. And we are immediately, because we do talk about child sexual abuse, mostly in the context of criminal justice, we do kind of realize this is illegal and that there could be really big consequences if this gets out. We kind of get scared, and there's this huge tendency to just try to keep it quiet and protect ourselves rather than do the right thing, call the police, get a proper investigation, and do, get a proper investigation, do what needs to be done based on the outcome of that. That's what we need to do, but it's so tempting not to do it. And most of the time that will work, especially for a while. And now, so, this will happen in schools. This will happen in like kiddie sports and small institutions. And we'll read about this in the paper sometimes, was some institution for a period of time was doing the wrong thing. And that exposes more kids to risk and to harm. Now, of course, we have some institutions that have brought this made this into an art form, with the Catholic Church, I'm sure, being everyone's absolute prime example of that. And I think when I first was invited to talk about this, the big news was that the Baltimore diocese there was a big investigational scandal that happened there, and that was getting its 15 minutes of fame. And now, in the time between when I was invited and this week, now we have the Illinois diocese. Every diocese, every Catholic diocese in the state of Illinois has been tied to 50 years worth of cover-ups. And yeah, it's a lot. And for those of you who've watched the movie Spotlight, I mean, I remember watching, I think I've seen Spotlight more than I've seen any other movie ever, because it became like a focus point for a lot of community education stuff. So I spoke at a lot of panels and things like that were preceded by the movie Spotlight. And I remember the first time I did that, and they show the screen at the end that lists the number of dioceses that have had a sex abuse scandal. And that was, I think that came out in 2016 or 17. So I'm sure that list was old at the time they made it, but it's screens and screens and screens of dioceses across the United States and then across the world that have been involved in child sex abuse scandals. And what keeps happening, and we'll get into this one in a minute, is that we open this up, a city like Rochester, New York I do remember that was mentioned because that's where I live. And I remember I was participating in something with the lawyer for the Rochester, New York diocese. And he said, all sure of himself, that yes, there was a scandal. It was like 5 children or something at a particular time, and they had taken a particular course of action. A few years later, the law changed in New York, and we were able to expose a fuller depth of what the Catholic diocese of the state of New York had done. And, suddenly thousands of victims names were revealed, huge numbers of priests were brought forward. Every diocese wound up getting sued in New York, every diocese in New York is now filed for bankruptcy because of how much they were hiding. So it's, and the Catholic diocese, again, because of the structure of the Catholic Church, where it's one enormous entity. I mean, the Catholic Church is literally, without exaggeration, it is the biggest non-governmental entity in the world. And it's even got one very small government thrown in there for good measure, the Vatican. So it's enormous, and the amount of wealth it holds is enormous, and the amount of influence and everything else it has is enormous. So they've done a very good job at not only hiding everything, but also documenting it. And there are records from the 15th century, discussions of what to do with these priests who are sexually abusing children in South America. So they've been doing this for a while. They've been both sexually abusing children for a while and writing it down, keeping records of it, and shuffling these records around for quite a while. So we know we have a better idea of what goes on there than we do in other churches. Catholic Church, by no matter of means, has a monopoly on this. Not that long ago, there's been a huge scandal with the Southern Baptist Church, which is smaller, but still huge and still very influential. And the same playbook, someone would be credibly accused of sexually abusing a child. Parents will go to that church and say, this horrible thing has happened. And they will typically say something like, okay, well, I'm very sorry. We'll make sure you never see that person again. And that's exactly what happens. But it doesn't mean that figure has gone into jail. It means they've been moved around and are still escaping consequences and still sexually abusing kids. This happened, much smaller institutions do that. This has been happening in any and every imaginable religious denomination, because it doesn't really matter so much what belief system you aspire to or belief system you profess. Anybody who wants to do this, anyone who has the inclination to do this, knows that this is a great way to access kids. So they put themselves in that situation. And now the one little insidious thing that most people don't know about why this is such a big deal, especially in religious organizations, is they have a great way of gaming the system to keep themselves from experiencing consequences. So there are statutes of limitations on most crimes. Typically, the only thing that is universally exempted from that is like murder and like in New York City, parking tickets, which if anyone's ever tried to park in New York City, you're just gonna really laugh at that. But there are no statutes of, and different states do this differently. Some states don't have statutes of limitations on any felony, et cetera, et cetera. But because of the enormous trauma that sexual abuse inflicts on children, and because of the family dynamics and potentially the political dynamics and everything else that goes into this, it is not normal, it is not common for children to disclose right after they are abused. So it takes, I've seen different numbers on this, but the most recent one is said about 21 years for a survivor to disclose that they've been sexually abused. Now that's an average. We've all heard of kids disclosing abuse. And when we read about someone getting prosecuted in the criminal justice system, it's usually a kid who has disclosed, sometimes corroborated by an adult, and sometimes, depending on what state we live in, it might be an adult, but usually it's a kid. The thing is, that's the tip of the iceberg. We see this, it makes us think that's how it always works, but it's not. Usually, kids don't disclose. And if you put a statute of limitations in place, you're going to be spared, you're going to filter out most victims. You're going to keep most victims from having access. And that means you're going to spare most abusers from consequences. And guess who lobbies for that? Guess who lobbies to keep statutes of limitation in place? It will be the biggest, most influential church in that state. And this is work that has to be done state by state. Just the way it is. The federal government they can influence a state's decisions, but these are generally governed by state laws. So the biggest religious institution in any given state is going to fight this. If there is ever a move among victims' rights advocates, children's advocates, et cetera, to amend the statute of limitations. In New York, that was the Catholic Church, followed by Aguda Israel, which is for the lobbying arm for the ultra-Orthodox, the Jewish ultra-Orthodox Church. So, because those are New York, and somewhat by some measures, the two biggest religious entities we've got. It took in New York 15 years for us to pass a very mild lengthening of the statute of limitations that contained a 1 year, what's called a civil look back window, 1 year in which victims who were already too old to press charges or file suits had the opportunity to file civil suit. You can't remove it in criminal court. You can remove it retroactively in civil court. And so it took us about 15 years to get that. We got a 1 year look back window. We got 6 months to announce it. And then COVID hit, and that got the courts all screwed up. So we were able to actually get it stretched out to 2 years, but some of that time wasn't really time because of COVID freezes and before. But that's a lot of work. That's a lot of money. That's very, very exhausting. And it gets very political. In New York, this became incredibly partisan. And a lot of child welfare organizations and stuff like that were kind of shied away from it because they didn't want to alienate the Catholic Church and pots of money. Like in New York State, Catholic Charities is a big deal. They didn't want to they didn't want to alienate anyone. They didn't want to, they just didn't want to go there. So it's a very, very tricky thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to fix laws and get so that the majority of victims even have the opportunity to get their story heard, to think about entering a court system and collect damages, to name their abusers, to have their abusers put on any kind of list, or even be publicly identifiable. So that's of all of the bad things that institutions do, that is probably the most insidious because most people don't even know it happens. And it is such an incredibly effective way to keep abusers on the street. I mean, and that was one of the things we would always talk about when we were talking to legislators and trying to convince them to pass this. I'm like, this is literally what they're advocating for. They're saying we don't want institutions that behave badly to have consequences. Well, who cares? I mean, I would never say that when I was in their office, but we don't have groups of criminals or those who defend criminals under any other circumstance do that. That is not a line of logic I have ever seen anyone engage with. It's like, oh yeah, we don't. And I mean, I am connected with people who do a lot of stuff with criminal justice, who are very interested in criminal justice reform, this, that, or the other way. The arguments never go, oh, we don't want people who did bad things to escape consequences. It's like we want people who do bad things to escape different consequences, or to have consequences that are commensurate with a crime, or to have consequences that are tied to rehabilitation. We just don't want them to experience anything at all.
Well, and it makes me think too of just like the enormous power that these, religious organizations have, with almost no scrutiny whatsoever as to like their filings when it comes to the IRS.
Mhm.
There's no oversight. You can tell people who to vote for. You can tell them that they need to eradicate trans people or whatever. You can incite violence, and there's really no consequences. And it makes me think too of, I don't know if you ever listen to podcasts or This American Life. This American Life is like one of my favorite longtime podcasts, and they did a whole thing where there was some, Catholic priest who was essentially sent around all over the United States, or all over a region of the United States, to be the fixer, because these Catholic churches were constantly, having to deal with these pedophiles who were in positions of power. And this father would go in then, and it's been so long since I listened to it. It's probably a very old podcast, but I just remember him feeling a crisis of faith. Like, what am I even doing here? Like, why? Like, this is the job they've given me, and now I'm questioning my own faith, which I would hope.
Yeah, well, yeah. And a lot of people, I think that the scandal, this ongoing decades and decades worth of scandal regarding this is a big reason why the Catholic Church is losing members, is losing money, is losing their ability, their moral authority. I do think that has a lot to do with it. And I have met people who have, I was talking at the group. There are professional psychologists who treat sex offenders, and they play a very important role in keeping sex offenders who aren't incarcerated from abusing. So this is like a whole discipline, and it's an incredibly hard job. And because it's such a hard job, they kind of get together for professional growth and group therapy once a year. And they like to have sex abuse survivors talk, because it reminds them what they're doing. So one year I was that survivor, and I had a guy come up to me after I spoke privately and just say, I want you to know, I left the seminary because I couldn't stand what they were doing. I couldn't stand how badly the church was handling this. I'm like, wow, thank you for saying that. That's a lot. I mean, it takes a lot to get in there. I mean, it's not a decision that's made lightly, and nor is leaving it a decision that's made lightly. But yeah, some people don't drink the Kool-Aid all at once. Some people don't become that 8-year-old who's like, oh, I can fix this myself. They actually do grasp that this is bigger than that, and I'm doing the wrong thing by helping these priests.
Well, and I've even heard of, because the algorithms, I guess, on Twitter and other social media, they have me figured out, and they know what I want to read about. But there was some pastor who, was trying to find a job, and because he, was like, no, I have a lot of compassion, and I'm an ally to people in the LGBTQ community. Dude couldn't find a job, and this is his calling, right? Like, this is the thing that he has studied his whole entire life for. He's moved his wife and children around the United States only to be kicked out of all these churches because he's not hateful enough.
Yeah. That is horrible. I mean, that is, that's horrible. I can believe it. I mean, I know that there are LGBT friendly churches. I don't know how much of that. I mean, I know there's some whole denominations are more LGBT friendly than others. And I also know that to somebody for whom organized religion isn't a big deal. It's like, well, why don't you just switch? But I know that is a big deal. I know that half of European history is wars being fought over why you can't do that. So yes, it is that is a big deal, and it's awful. I mean, I see. So another thing about my organization, we are, as far as I know, the only children's welfare organization that's taking a stand on gender affirming healthcare bans. Because again, very controversial. And unlike when we're taking a stand against the Catholic Church, where there was, we were worried about certain things happening to us, but you didn't get influxes of hate mail the way you do when you take a stand for trans children. Oh my goodness. And I mean, this is as an ally, I can only, the first time we sent out an email against gender affirming healthcare bans, I got this horrible, hateful, but also very sloppily written and just nonsense stuff back. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it hurts your feelings because, you think you're trying to be a good person here and you get this horrible stuff and it hurts. And like, well, okay, I can only imagine this is like 1% of 1% of what it's got to feel like to be these kids. So I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, we get the same thing here. A couple weeks.
I'm sure.
Yeah, Ari Drennan was on, and there was somebody who knew way more than Ari ever could and inserted themselves into the chat. So we get that too. There are a few mostly rhetorical questions here, I think, because this one seems rhetorical to me. Would Jesus really forgive an abuser if they just confessed their sins and didn't turn themselves into the authorities? I would imagine that. Well, first of all, depending on the Jesus that y'all believe in, right? But
exactly.
The Jesus that I would like to believe in would have thought that's an empty, thank you so much for that confession, but we're still going to have to deal with you.
Yeah. So I will say this, a big part of my personal and professional life revolves around working with survivors. And the question of forgiveness is like a huge thing for people. And what I've learned, okay, so why do you want to forgive this person? And a lot of the time it's kind of like, well, isn't that what you need to do to heal? And like, no, there's actually no empirical evidence to that effect. And this is if their answer is because my pastor tells me I'll go to hell if I don't, I'm like, okay, bring that up with your pastor. I cannot help you there. That is not a part of my life. Organized religion is, and the way that you're taught to see the world through that lens, that is not something I can do. I can tell you about this as a survivor. And then when they kind of, like, even 12-step programs, if you have a good sponsor and you have people who know what they're doing and are thoughtful and mindful about it and listen, can be very helpful. If you have a bad sponsor and they don't get that, or they really have internalized a lot of stuff that they've heard about religion and forgiveness, it can actually be incredibly harmful. And I've heard people say they want to forgive their abuser because my sponsors told me I'll never be able to be sober all their lives. Well, like, okay, your sponsor should not be holding your sobriety, the promise of sobriety ransom. That's really not cool. But also, okay, so what does that mean to you? What does forgiveness mean to you in that context? And usually, when people tell you in the context of sexual abuse, regardless of who's telling it to you, when people talk about forgive your abuser, what they usually mean is stop talking about this. It's making me uncomfortable. That is not forgiveness. You can forgive, and what I will always advise people to do is, if you really do feel compelled to forgive this person, first of all, figure out what that means. Second of all, make sure that what forgiveness means to you is supportive of community safety. So it means, yes, I will I'm going to forgive you. I'm not going to hate you anymore. I'm going to just kind of live my life as though you don't exist. But if a police officer knocks on my door and asks if I know anything about you being a sexual predator, I'm going to work with them. Or I will, if I see that you are living with children or working with children, I'm going to reach out and talk about that. Because that is not incompatible with forgiveness. That's you empowering yourself and doing something to protect children. You know, saying, I'm just not going to talk about this ever again. That is not helping anyone, particularly not helping you.
And it's such a tough and personal decision, you know, like depending on, you know, because I'm a survivor of abuse myself. And of course, it was a family member. It's never drag queens. It's never trans people.
No, indeed.
No, it's almost always a straight white man who leads with the fact that he's a follower of Christ. And certainly that's who my abuser was. And, you know, I made the decision whether I should have or not, but I did. And I confronted people, and family members chose to believe them over me. And that's just the way. And so there's that whole fallout. Whenever you do finally tackle the abuse that you go through, you should have the number of a good therapist on hand or a good support group, because it's one of the toughest things. I'm going to go ahead and go to the question, or to the chat over here. Again, this is more of a comment. Technically, this is from Bex. Bex says, technically, physical and sexual abuse aren't sins in the Bible anyway. So there is no requirement of turning yourself into authorities or even asking for forgiveness. Plus, Christians are only accountable to the laws of God, not the laws of man, per their beliefs. So more of a comment.
Which, yeah, I mean, yes, I've heard people say that, which is okay. If you want to believe that, if you want to live your life that way, that's fine. But then don't go chasing the drag queens. Don't go chasing LGBTQ folks. Don't go chasing intellectuals. Don't go chasing academia. Don't go weaponizing this issue and don't go spending millions and millions and millions of dollars lobbying against it. If you believe, if that's the hill you want to die on, that's fine, but don't waste lots of money to keep it, to keep survivors from having access to justice.
Well, and we are here in Arizona. I think Mesa, Arizona is second only to Salt Lake City as far as Mormon population. So just recently, there was a court decision that upheld the law in Arizona and many other states where clergy do not have to report abuse of any kind. And they fight, they had a team of attorneys, and they have all of these systems in place to protect these people. And it's just when they come out and start saying, well, y'all are groomers and you are the indoctrinators, and you're just like, you're sitting there holding up a mirror to them and saying, wait, are you sure? Like,
right.
It's crazy making.
Yeah.
Here's another one. This one comes from Jackie. Jackie says, I'm surprised and thankful to hear you say that each person needs to realize that anyone at any time could be someone who harms children. I often hear people say the church and the GOP is projecting. This feels isolating to me, as my personal experience with child abuse and child sexual abuse is from a lifelong atheist and a lesbian couple. Okay. I have been told I cannot speak about what happened and still be an ally, that I myself am projecting, or that I am an apologist for Republicans, GOP, or that I secretly hate LGBTQ people because my experience is outside of the normal church. Republicans, GOP are always projecting. People also laugh or don't believe me when I say that my children were almost abducted from their patio simply because that isn't common. So it isn't something you have to worry about. It makes me feel like I live in an alternative reality when the narrative everyone else wants to live by. What do you think is at the root of my experience being so different from people? What is common or popular? That's a lot. There's a lot going on there. I think that the question, so Abuse is abuse, and I don't care if somebody is a member of the LGBTQ community. I don't care if they're a teacher. I was a teacher for many years, and people would accuse me of being a grooming indoctrinator. But if there's a teacher on my campus who's abusing kids, whether they're straight or gay, I'm going to tell somebody about it.
Mhm.
So I feel really bad for you, Jackie, that was your experience. And the fact that the experience that you had is the one that they're trying to make like, this is actually what really happens. And it isn't what happens. But it's still important for you to say that that's what happened to you. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Melanie?
So the one thing first of all, I'm very, very sorry that happened. Thank you for talking about it. Thank you. The one thing I always try to explain is that child sexual abuse is incredibly, incredibly common. I mean, 1 out of 5 kids can expect to experience this. So it is enormously common. When you're looking at something that is that common, there's going to be, you're going to see outliers. So a small percentage, a rare version of something that common is still something you can expect to see. I mean, I certainly know people who have been sexually abused by women, males and females. I'm not sure if I recall the sexual orientation or ever learned the sexual orientation of those women, but it certainly happens. And again, this is just so common that we will see outliers. I mean, again, like attempted kidnapping is not the most common thing in the world, but it happens. So, I mean, thank you for believing in yourself enough to speak your own truth.
Yeah. And I mean, you brought up too, I get really frustrated too when there's a few people that I follow on Twitter and her name is BEKS, not BEX, like the person who's on this chat, but she and somebody else and a few other people like post daily people who are abusers. And I get really frustrated with like that narrative too, that older women who are sexually abusing young men, young boys, they get a pass because that's every young boy's fantasy. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, they were raped.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's more awareness about that, but there certainly isn't enough.
No, I agree. Here's another, it looks like a comment. This is from Ken. My father had to leave the American Baptist Convention because of his pro-choice and pro-LGBT ministry, I'm sure. Oh, okay, there's a little conversation there. I get it. I know what was being said. Okay, here is from Lorraine. She says, I was taught in Catholic school that I could go through a stop sign or traffic light as those were laws made by man, not God. So no need to turn myself in. That was decades ago. I have no idea what is being taught today. Oh my gosh, do they really say that? I'm thankful. I was raised in an agnostic household. Thank goodness. Thanks, Mom and Dad. So these some of the stories that we hear from our members are like so foreign to me.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly hope you were, regardless of the morality of running stop signs, I certainly hope you learned some physics here and there, and you probably did, and that's why you're still here. Because yeah, some things we just don't do because they're a bad idea.
Yeah. Okay, Mars has a really good question here. Melanie, can you talk a bit more about ACEs? And again, for those of you who aren't well versed, that is the Adverse Childhood Experience Score and the long-term effects of this trauma. So can you talk about that ACEs and long-term effects?
Okay, so adverse childhood experiences, the study was done in the 90s in San Diego. So a very, very wealthy, very, very educated demographic. And so people who were born mostly in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They found that of these wealthy, educated people born in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, a huge 2/3 of them had experienced some sort of childhood trauma. They broke it down into 10 traumas: sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, and some other things that aren't legally abuse, but we all recognize as being bad for children, like witnessing domestic violence, having a parent who's with significant untreated drug addiction, significant untreated mental illness, stuff like that. So they found that, first of all of these 10 things behave similarly. So someone who experienced sexual abuse and emotional neglect is likely to have the same problems down the line as somebody who experienced physical abuse and witnessed domestic violence. Just random. There is no pattern that any combination of these things behave differently than any others. But the more of these things you have, the worse your outcome, in some ways, the worse your life trajectory is more likely to be. So everybody before then, it was very well known that child abuse was linked to mental illness, and there's some links to criminal justice system involvement. But one of the more interesting things that this study demonstrated was that not only is it linked to stuff that relates to how we feel emotionally, which is kind of logical. I mean, you have a bad enough childhood, you have people tell you in word and in deed all the time that you're bad, that you're not safe, the world is not a safe place. You know, you expect that can have a lasting impact on how you feel. But this actually changes the way your cells grow and your organ systems grow, and the way a child's brain can grow. And that children, the higher somebody's ACE score is, if it gets high enough, get to a score of over 4, you start looking at increased risk of cancer, increased risk of COPD, increased risk of ischemic heart disease, all these physical things nobody really understood. Things like increased struggle with employment, higher absenteeism, significant financial hardship in the last year. All of these things that it makes sense when you think about it, but it's not something anybody had ever really thought about or clarified. So when you talk about the impact of, in this case, talking about child sexual abuse, but all of them really, it's not just somebody really, really hurt you and really, really betrayed your trust and made you feel really, really bad. It's somebody did something that can potentially shorten your lifespan, that can potentially lower your ability to earn your earning potential throughout your life, that makes it less likely for you to be in a healthy relationship and more likely to be in an abusive one. This is really, really bad stuff. And obviously, lots of survivors live good lives. There are there are ways that these cycles can be interrupted at any point, and that's good and that's important. And I don't want to lose sight of that. But I also refuse to just not say what the study says, because this is bad. And when we're talking about institutions that spend millions of dollars to keep people who engage in these things above the law, that is something we need to talk about. That is a problem.
I was lucky enough, gosh, this would have been back in 2014, 15. There was we had a really great county superintendent who actually had a whole series. It was like a 4-part series, and it started off with ACEs, because I was teaching at the time and I was on my local school board as well. And for me to just be able to take the quiz myself and be like, whoa, I am a 4 out of 10. I didn't think, or seeing other people in my lives who, like you said, had gone on to have really successful careers, all these things, but they still, but they had a score of 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
Which in ACEs language is huge.
Yeah.
And like you said, the outcomes sometimes are really horrendous. So, not everybody necessarily goes through that, but you think about, I'm very lucky. I had networks of people who were able to support me when I finally tackled what happened to me when I was younger. And I had, I just had a support system. If you're a kid who has a 6 out of 10 ACEs score and you're already in the foster system, chances are you're going to end up unhoused, incarcerated, or hospitalized, or dead. Your outcomes don't look good. let's see, there's another message here. Let me see what it says. Oh, and I put in a couple of things. So we put in the ACEs quiz from Melanie's website, if you want to take that to see where you are on the quiz there. But then I also put in there's a great book, and I mentioned it last week when we were talking to R.L. Stoller, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, because
Yes.
it's such a good book, right? Everybody
Yes, I
should
love
read it.
that.
And it reads like fiction, like it's so engaging because it's very, very science heavy.
Mhm.
The way that he's able to really weave in the science with the social science, he does
Yeah.
such a great job. I highly recommend it. And it talks about brain development too, and how people, depending on where they are in the brain development part of their lives, how that abuse will affect them.
Right.
You know, if you're a 3 or 4-year-old kid who's being sexually abused, you may have like more hypersexualized tendencies just because you feel like that's what you need to do. Whereas if you're a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old who has some knowledge about their own body and sexuality, it turns into this shame and this like I hate myself, even, like, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. So here's another comment. This one comes from John. Child sexual abuse is common in every organization that involves children: Boy Scouts, youth clubs, gymnastics teams, etc. The irony of abuse by religious organizations is that the foundational belief and educational tactic of many churches, threatening kids with everlasting hellfire, is itself a significant form of child abuse. Amen. Do you want to comment on that, Melanie?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is not helpful for teaching kids how to navigate a world, teaching kids how to navigate the world. I mean, it isn't. Interest in what effects religion actually can have on kids, and can that under some circumstances be an ACE itself, can that affect kids to that extent? That's actually something we are in the earliest stages of trying to understand. But because there probably is at some point in which it becomes that. If some child at some point cannot, realize, feels they are irredeemable, yes, that probably, having a church tell a kid you're irredeemable, you're worthless, you're horrible, is no better, probably gets to the point where it's no better than the parent does it. So that is actually a field of research, and that is something my organization is in the earliest stages of investigating if we can further that along. But yeah, the other part of that is like, so these schools, yes, they tell the kids they're horrible, and they tell that sex is horrible and sexuality is horrible. Well, okay, kids still grow up, kids still go through puberty. They need to understand some of this stuff. And once upon a time, it's actually like, I won't say that there's a lobbying thing, but up until a couple of years ago, it seemed like conservatives are a lot more interested in having people like me come to a school and talk about sexual abuse and sex trafficking and stuff like that than anybody else was, because I think they were just so uncomfortable having those conversations.
Yeah.
That they'd rather outsource it. Okay, that's fine. There's a lot to be said for doing it that way. Now all of a sudden, you wake up one day and anyone who mentions anything about sexuality to a kid under any circumstances is going to be, hanged from the highest tree. This is not useful, and this is not good. And one of the things that has been considered a best practice in sexual abuse prevention forever has been age-appropriate, universal, K-12 discussion of healthy relationships and healthy sexuality. And no, that doesn't mean showing kindergartners what condoms are. It means talking with kindergartners about the name for their genitals, and talking with kindergartners that they have a right to say no to touch, and to enforce physical boundaries. That's it. And this had been largely without controversy. A lot of states are passing these bills. A lot of school districts were hiring people to do this. It wasn't that bad until like this year.
So in the school district where I was on the governing board, I got onto the board in 2012, and I believe it was 2013 or 14 where we approved without fanfare, without any kind of media hullabaloo, nothing. We approved comprehensive sex ed. And now that program has been in place for, over or almost a decade now. And the proof is in the pudding. Like, teen pregnancies have dropped. Children's understanding of STIs has increased. Their ability to call out sexual abuse when they know what it is and have the vocabulary for it. Like, this is a win-win. And so but then back in, I want to say it was like 2018, 19. So in the Trump era, right? Somebody got real angry. She was an aide, a classroom aide in the class. And she didn't teach CSE at all. But she found out somehow, somebody told her that we had CSE in that district, and she alerted her, this blog poster who has 0 people who read her blog, but like I knew that there was going to be something about, and the funniest part about it, the extension of our CSE wasn't under debate or discussion. She was like, she wanted to make a public show of the fact that she was resigning because she worked in a district that taught CSE. And it was like, okay, bye. But like, the good news, because she put it on social media, I was actually able to alert some of my friends from GLSEN and other places to say, hey, can you talk about why this is really important for you? And it's just so silly that this is where we are. And the fact that, these programs that are designed to keep kids safe, the other side, like, Turning Point USA, ADF, whoever has bundled and packaged this to make it seem like we're trying to transition kids, for crying out loud. Like, they really
Exactly
need that. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's see. So let's see, couple more, because I want to honor everybody's time. It's 12:58. Jackie says, I'm not bragging, and I know it isn't a competition, but my ACE score is 9. Oh, Jackie, I'm so sorry. Thanks, smart people, for secular therapy. I didn't even know I was abused. It was normal. And I was told I was crazy for being so different and wanting something else. Boy, that tracks. Debbie says, these 2 episodes, she posted 2 episodes of Mormon Stories podcast that address the harms done by the church. So there's a link in there. I'm going to click on that link so I don't lose it later. But the harms done by the church, teaching that inappropriate sexual activity is next to murder and failing to protect victims. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Ken says that book bans seem to especially target books that discuss child sex abuse. They sure do, especially the experiences of LGBT youth, which, by the way, last week, I think it was last week or the week before, if it was R.L. Stoller or the person who was before them, they talked about that LGBTQ youth are much more likely to be abused.
Yes. Yeah, because they're vulnerable. I mean, they, even before they've been demonized in the last couple of years, there's always been an othering. They're different. I'm not normal. There's something different with me, yada, yada. And yes, vulnerability always makes kids more likely to be sexually abused, because they're going to be reaching out for someone who's going to love and accept them. And that person who's offering that often isn't a good person.
Well, and like Ryan said last week, these are kids who have already been taught through the church to be ashamed about who they are. So if there's an adult in their life who identifies what they are, meaning gay, trans, whatever, then they will use that as a way to continue to abuse them.
Right.
Diane Post says, you'll notice that the ones doing it are the same ones trying to ban it, obviously, so that they can have more access to children without consequences. I mean, I can't unsee it now that I've seen it, right? Jackie says the right to say no to touch is such a big one. There is such a push, even in non-religious spaces, for people to show gratitude or, you know, gratitude is a good thing, but not when you use the expectation of gratitude to take away somebody's autonomy. And I think about that. Oh, come on, go give your drunken uncle at Thanksgiving a hug. He's your uncle. And if the child isn't like, you know, inherently saying, I don't trust this guy, we need to honor that. I never made my kids hug or kiss anybody because.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And then there's a whole, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to click on all these links now, but there's a whole bunch of links here that have been posted. Debbie says, my heart goes out to all of you who have been abused in any way. Thank you for using your experience.
Good
Hold on,
afternoon,
I clicked
everybody,
on a
and
link
thank
and
you
now
for
there's
joining
voice.
us.
Sorry. Thank you for using your experience to help others. And I'm glad, you know, Melanie, like this is exhausting work. Ryan was here last week and all these folks, Chrissy's going to be here next week. And like, it's exhausting work. And even myself and just tracking, especially with this growing, you know, movement to call all of us groomers and indoctrinators. For those of us who have been groomed and abused, it's incredibly triggering. But for, you know, it sounds like the both of us, we do this because we just don't want it to happen to anybody else anymore.
Exactly. And it's like, right. It's like, what else am I supposed to do with this? You know, I've got this experience. It's to pretend I don't isn't helping anyone, including myself. You know, I have learned things. It's learning it is great, but sharing it is more important. So.
And you could be, you know, you could cross paths with somebody who's like, oh my gosh, I totally see myself in Melanie. And now Melanie has given me the strength to be able to do the things that I need to do to make myself right. So because these are oftentimes very depressing conversations and we're heading into a weekend, what is something right now in your life that gives you like joy, happiness, or hope?
Oh, that's so okay. One of the things that gives me a lot of joy is the ability that technology is giving us to connect with people and to connect with people who are genuinely like us. It gives abuse survivors an incredible ability to connect. It gives LGBT folks an incredible ability to connect. Social media may not be perfect, but it does, and especially for people like I know it's very hard for me to really authentically connect to somebody who hasn't been through an awful lot of trauma. So that means in my professional life, and it's in just day to day, you know, I don't meet a lot of people who I really get and who really get me. Through social media, I can find more of that, and I really appreciate that. And just in other things, it's May in New York, which is not in the triple digits. It's only gotten 70 a handful of times so far. The birds are migrating, the leaves are blossoming out because, you know, we get rain here and we get all this lush greenery and we get droves of migratory birds, and it's very, very beautiful. And I'm trying to go out. I've gone out at least once a week, every week, and just watch the bird migration. That brings me a lot of peace and a lot of joy. And, you know, it's the connectedness and the world. There is a lot of beauty in this world, and this world is really, really, really big. You have to open your eyes to it, and you have to pay attention, and you have to see what's going on. But there is a lot of beauty and a lot of connectedness out there, and that is good. That does bring me joy.
Boy, I think that's probably the best answer that we've gotten in a minute, because now you just make me want to go outside and touch grass, even though, but I'll probably wait until like, I don't know, 6:30 tonight when the sun starts to set, because then it'll be like in the 90s, but it's still beautiful. And lucky for us, Lindsay says, wait until October. But the good news for those of us who live in Arizona, we get to travel to weather. So if we want to, we can drive 2.5 hours to Flagstaff and be in the mountains, or we can drive 2.5 hours and be in San Diego on the beach. So we get to just drive to the weather. But Melanie, this has been great. We have the best speakers, and I appreciate you so much for the work that you do and all that you do to just protect kids and to educate others so that they can do the same. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. Well, you have a great weekend, Melanie, and everybody else, y'all have a great weekend too.
Yeah, you too.
See y'all later. Bye-bye.